I just really hope that the guys that work with them at Sonic Team and the rest of the Sonic Team staff understand what made this game so successful, and they take the time to really incorporate that in their future projects. But I guess that's going to be a review for another day. Hey everyone, Chris here for UpmostGames. Welcome back to Upmost Reviews. As always, I'm going to be doing a decently in-depth review for Sonic Forces, so potential spoiler alert right now. So let's jump into the recap. I went back after our last Sonic Forces episode and received the rest of the achievements. That means 8 maxed out avatars, all S ranks, finished all the standard missions, and unlocked all the weapons, outfits, and accessories for the avatar. That also means grinding out 100,000 rings. So thanks, Mission 25. Really appreciate you catting me there at 999. So Sonic Forces is the latest Sonic game, and it's developed by Sonic Team. Same team behind Sonic Generations and Sonic Colors. Arguably 2 of the best 3D Sonic games to come out in a long time. Now let's answer the question you're probably wondering. Why would they bother making another Sonic? No, what? No! Okay, so the question is it better than Mania? And if I'm being realistic, no, it's not. But that's because I'm saying that for more of a would it sell better if they released around the same time, rather than the individual games itself? As I've said many times with the 2D retro versus their 3D sequels, the comparison isn't always one-to-one. Mania satisfied an itch that was universally ached for between fans of both the retro and the modern Sonic games. But Forces focuses primarily on the modern audience, who were really hoping for a Generations 2. So let's look at the differences between this and the previous 3D Sonic games like Generations and Colors. The elemental shields are gone from classic Sonic, but he now has the drop dash from Sonic Mania. Modern Sonic no longer gets boost meter from rings like he would in Generations, but he still gets it from wisp capsules. Wow, that's a harder sentence than I thought. Wisp capsules, why? Because I can't think of the other one, because I was too busy thinking about wisp caps. From whisk containers and enemies, like you would in the other games. He also can no longer drift, which personally for me is pretty disappointing. They also added a semi-new game style with the create your own character, the avatar. I say semi-new because it's basically modern Sonic gameplay with a gun. I just realized that sounds like Shadow the Hedgehog. Fuck! I kid. If I'm being serious, it's actually a pretty fun part of the game. The story behind this one is more in-depth than Mania. Dr. Eggman has a new minion, Infinite, who he's fused with the Phantom Ruby. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same one from Sonic Mania, but I'm guessing it is based on the sound effects and the way it messes with time and reality. But Eggman has also seemingly convinced Sonic's previous villains to join up with him. And so we start the game with Sonic's defeat, Eggman conquering the planet, and, well, a small resistance being formed by Knuckles, which is pretty surprising. The resistance is made up of a bunch of the old previous Sonic game characters, except Tails. Poor living in the rubble Tails.
Sonic is gone, Amy, and Tails has just lost it.
Oh, and Classic shows up.
Sonic? You're alive! Wait, what? Oh, you're that Sonic from another dimension, aren't you? Right, that makes sense, I think. Maybe the power that Eggman is using is somehow affecting other dimensions.
And that is all the explanation we get. Then it's just...
Goodbye. Get home safely, Sonic. And thanks for everything.
Bye! Good luck getting a legit explanation about this.
Cheer up, Tails. I'm sure we'll run into him again.
While the story isn't anything amazing, I wanted to note that there are some pretty dark moments in the story. Sonic is legitimately believed to be dead near the beginning of the story, but when the Resistance finds out that he's still alive, they find out that he's being tortured on the Death Egg before he's scheduled to be exiled and shot into space. The new bad guy, Infinite, just straight up murders bystanders left and right. At the end, brings the sun right up to the planet, and that's his big threatening, guess what's about to happen to you guys, guess you better stop it, even though there's no way of stopping it. One thing I wasn't expecting though was some kinda cool, probably unintentional character development that happened. With Sonic presumed dead in the beginning, we're able to see things like Knuckles becoming this really strong and level-headed leader, as well as watching Tails just fall into the situation of self-doubt.
On it. I couldn't figure it out for you, buddy. I'm sorry I wasn't smart enough.
There's even an interesting personal growth with your avatar as he goes from coward to hero.
Taste your terror, child. All that anxiety and doubt. It's delicious. I'm going to fight and die here, or run away in fear again.
Hey, don't be scared. This is your moment to shine. Keep going. Don't let your fear own you.
Fine. I will teach you fear, then pain.
Of course, it still has that cheesy Sonic dialogue, so it comes off campy at best, unfortunately. And there's actually one part in this story where you end up getting taken to a different dimension, presumably trapped forever, but then they immediately have you escape. Like, absolutely nothing happens. Literally, Sonic says,
What happened, Sonic? You two just up and disappeared. Nothing happened. Literally. Now let's track down Eggman.
I'm not sure if it was meant to have more to it, like an actual section where you played inside null space or what have you, but if that was what I was presenting with, that's what I'm going to have to base it off of. It was really just weird. And ultimately, the story kind of fizzles out at the end, and we don't get to find out what happens to the villains after you defeated them. Now let's discuss levels. The levels in Sonic Forces aren't meant to be the nostalgia trip that Sonic Generations levels were, but they're rather... they used known locations to really build and flesh out the world. I mean this in more of terms of like locations on a map rather than the actual single standalone levels. For example, there are multiple levels that take place in the same area. Not like Sonic Adventure 1 where the levels were repurposed for 3 to 6 characters, though sometimes Modern and the Avatar would share certain levels even solo. But typically like Sonic Adventure 2 with City Escape, Radical Highway, and Mission Street all being set in the same city, but just different areas of that city. Most likely they did this because they wouldn't have to make as many model assets for levels, which is where it gets a little disappointing seeing as there's only like 6 main areas, but overall it's not a bad idea. All in all, the quality of the game has gone up between this and the previous installments. Some of the gameplay was scrapped in favor of more inclusive features that would make it easier for first-time players to really get into it. As we discussed, Modern lost the drift mechanic and Classic gained the drop dash from Sonic Mania, which is always a positive in my opinion. The drop dash really helps Classic feel just as fast as Mania. Doing so really makes sense because at this point it makes Classic Sonic just as fluid as Mania Sonic. But unfortunately it seems like Classic has odd moments when he just loses momentum. It's never really obvious when it's going to happen, but it just kind of happens sometimes and it breaks the flow of the game. Another really frustrating part of the mechanics is trying to platform efficiently with Modern Sonic. If you've watched my playthrough, you know that I'm not a fan of those parts. The biggest issue with these parts is that you have to play flawlessly. You have to boost at the right time, jump at the right time, homing attack the right enemies, or else you end up falling into this pit of more platforming that just feels sluggish and clunky just to get back on track. It's fine after you play the level a few times and you have an idea of what's coming up and where you need to be, but the first time through going into an area blind like this is pretty frustrating. I think one of the things that helped the Adventure series a lot with their platforming bits was giving characters floatier jumps, that way they could have time to line up where they were going to land. It wouldn't hurt to loosen up the helming attack bit, just a little, but enough about my own personal inadequacies. The new kit, the avatars, create a character that you make from animals that they provide you. You have your dog, your wolf, your rabbit, your bear, your cat, your bird, and of course the hedgehog. Sorry, for some odd reason there's no fox or echidna. I don't understand why. Each race has their own ability, but if I was being realistic, the best one overall is the wolf's ability. It draws in items towards you. And this doesn't mean just rings or 10 rings, it also gives you a bit more room for error when it comes to things like capsules, number rings, and even the silver moon rings. Making it much easier to finish up those as well as racking up a lot of rings, and by association, more points. It would have been better to see some of the other animals get better perks aside from rings stick around longer and start with the rings after you die, since most people will just restart the level at that point. So if you're having trouble getting an S, I would suggest getting the wolf and possibly doing the daily missions, because those count too. The Avatar gets plenty of neat customizable bits for cosmetic fun. The pieces that affect your gameplay are called Wispins. A lot of them are pretty well balanced between effectiveness of the attack and the ease of mobility. Wispins like Cube and Android do well with killing enemies, but their ability is not that great for getting around. Whereas you might miss enemies during an attack when you're using lightning and hover, but their abilities are pretty easy to get around with. The real thing to pay attention to when you're selecting Wispins is the mods attached to them. Most of the time they're pretty beneficial, but I've had some bad experiences with any of the mods that increase your speed either from landing or by stomping. These can make some of the 3D platforming parts pretty difficult. But that's not always the case. I usually just homing attack to make sure I would safely get around without flying off the edge. The solo avatar stages have a nice balance of stop and go, but doesn't feel too forced. This also goes for the Sonic/Avatar missions, in which you get to play with Sonic, which allows you to double jump, in case you didn't pick the bird, and to do Sonic's boost, in case you didn't pick the drill. There's also a couple parts in the game where you and Sonic can team up to do what is called a double boost. The first time I got to do the double boost, it was probably one of the coolest parts. You feel really strong and unstoppable, especially when the music's going in this heroic climax of an anime show.
Yeah, that's how it's done. We've got unstoppable speed and timing. We just have to keep this up. Bingo, found a way in.
In the Avatar missions, most of the time the pace is set by enemy placement and the weapons you're using. So, depending on your weapons and playstyle, the pace is pretty much dictated by you. Overall, I think it was a good idea getting a third gameplay style in the mix. It really helps to break up the modern classic gameplays with something that feels like a nice balance of speed between both of them. The bosses in the game were alright. Modern got some cool fights with Infinite, which incidentally was the highlight of the Avatar's fights, and Classic had 2 boss parts where he launched rocks at people, which just makes me feel cheated because we didn't get to fight Chaos or Shadow in all this. The very last boss, well, the very last boss's final form was actually pretty fun, but the 2 parts leading up to it were, well, kind of tedious and annoying. But all in all, I'd have to say it was a pretty good fight. I also thought having a normal and a hard mode was interesting and more inviting. Realistically, though, this is a psychological technique that designers use to take away the stigma of playing on an easier mode. But if I'm being honest, these Sonic games tend to have a bit of an acquired taste to them compared to something like the classic style of Sonic Mania. So it's better to be eased into it than just Sonic Unleashed right in the face. Overall, I'd have to give it a just gravy on the savory scale. For fans of the series, this will be a solid entry to add to the collection, and for others, it's much more accessible than the previous Sonic games, and the price is pretty good. So if you'd like to dip your toes in and test it out, this is probably one of the better ones to do it with. When all is said and done, I actually had a lot of fun with Sonic Forces. It was really short, but the price value was around $40 American, so, you know, it was pretty satisfying for what it was. Good amount of levels, the right length per level, and the difficulty curve wasn't too bad, even though it seemed like it kind of ramped up around like level 25, but maybe that was just me. Of course, that's just my opinion on Sonic Forces, so let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Did you like it? Did you dislike it? If you disliked it, what were some things that could have been done to make it better? Did you want to take a cue from Mario Odyssey and make the rings more worthwhile, like letting you buy avatar items rather than just throwing them at you? I mean, clearly I do, but that's because I'm still bitter about collecting 100 rings or 100,000 rings. That stupid achievement. Anyways, I've been Chris for UpmostGames. Thanks for watching.